Hello and welcome back to the Wisdom of Warhammer channel. And today we're going over one of the chapter masters of the Crimson Fists, Pedro Cantor. We'll be going over his service in the chapter as chapter master. Then, just like my other videos, we'll be going over the lessons we can learn from. But before we begin, I want to say everything Warhammer is owned by Games Workshop and Black Library, so go support them. So shall we begin with the legend of Lord Hellblade, Pedro Cantor. But we do not know how he became chapter master, but he was chapter master during the orc invasion of Rin's world. Before the orcs arrived, he sent men to the capital city to help the defenders. But the orcs arrived earlier than expected and the war for Rin's world began. During the battle at Arx Tyrannus, the fortress monastery of the Crimson Fists, a missile malfunctioned and landed in the underground munitions depot of the fortress, blowing up the monastery and killing a massive amount of space marines. Pedro gathered the survivors from the ruins of the fortress monastery and led them to the capital city of Rin's world to assist the company of marines stationed there. They encountered many civilians from the rural parts of the world and gathered them and helped them get to safety. They got to Rin City and helped the 4th Company and some of the 1st Company hold against the Orc Wa for 18 months. Eventually, the Orcs built Gargants, massive war machines that the Space Marines could not destroy. Thankfully, a massive war fleet of Imperial ships arrived in system and were able to land on the planet thanks to Pedro and his Marines taking back the spaceport from the Greenskins. But this war was far from over. But what we can see from this war is Pedro is a very good tactician as a Space Marine, better than most. He has his Gene Father's military mind as well as the respect for the humans he protects. But let us continue with his service as the chapter master. After Imperial reinforcements arrived and helped with the Gargants, Pedro ordered his men into infiltration teams due to the small number of Crimson Fists and ordered them to kill all orcs they could find on Rin's world. They did have a battle at a place called Trader's Gorge, but they were outmanned and their gear was heavily damaged from the war. But they went anyway. 24 Crimson Fists marched to war against the remaining orcs. They were doing well against the Greenskins, but they were eventually being pushed back. But fate had other plans. They encountered help from Eldari Rangers sniping the orcs and assisting the Crimson Fists. Pedro paid no mind and welcomed the help from the Xenos. After the battle was closed, the Eldari Rangers came out and talked to Pedro. They left soon after. Crimson Fist brutally destroyed the remaining orcs and started to rebuild from the war that consumed Rin's world. But in Warhammer, things are not that simple in the universe. During this time, the 13th Black Crusade was beginning, and the warp was in flames, and a demonic incursion came to Rin's world and wreaked havoc on the planet, with the still rebuilding Crimson Fists. Pedro led his men once again, and they were able to hold off until the Indominus crusade arrived with Guilliman at its head. During the time, the newly resurrected Primarch was at Rin's world helping the Crimson Fist rebuild. He spoke to Pedro a few times, and just like this, Pedro felt the aura that the Primarch had, which was overwhelming. When the Indominus crusade left, Guilliman spoke to Pedro one last time, saying that he reminded him of his brother Rogal Dorn, who once said that the Primarchs and Space Marines were made to unite humanity. He could see this side of Dorn in Pedro and commented on how Pedro inspires loyalty around him. He also said that he holds his duty as chapter master above glory or vengeance. After the Primarch left and the Crimson Fist recovered and were getting acquainted with the Primaris Marines, Pedro sent out the Fist and strike forces to help planets that needed it. Pedro was also ordered to make the Loki system into a fortress so other military forces could use the planets into staging points for deployments. Recently, Pedro led the Crimson Fists to the planet of Vigilus during the War of the Beasts. Now we have come to the end of the lore part of the video. Now we will discuss the lessons from Lord Hellblade. The first lesson we can learn from Pedro is that he has the military tactics of his gene father, Rogel Doran. We can see this during the War for Rin's World, in him holding the Crimson Fist together instead of going out in a blaze of glory. He led them to defend the people of Rin City and wait for reinforcements. Even after the Imperial fleet arrived, he sent his chapter out into small infiltration squads to hurt the remaining orcs. When he found out where their last orcs were, he personally led his brothers again to eliminate the orcs at Trader's Gorge. Another feat of Pedro's tactical mind is when he led a boarding action against an orc kill cruiser early in his career. He and his men disabled the ship, and a Crimson Fist cruiser was able to destroy the orc ship fully. As Pedro continued his service as leader of his chapter, he inspires loyalty and heroism. He is still able to lead his men to victory even during a great tragedy. For example, the orc invasion of Rin's world. The lesson here is being tactical and using your mind tactically in situations that require thought and preparation. The tip for this is to look at a situation that requires a plan. Sometimes the plan does not go well. This means to prepare backups for important steps in the plan. Like before, create a list and complete the list. Then, if a piece of the plan does not go as planned, then look at the backup part to replace that part of the plan that didn't work. But don't think that the plan will go through all the time. Instead of worrying about it, just go through with the plan with the main goal in mind. The second and final lesson from Pedro Cantor is having morals, which is defined by having standards of behavior or beliefs concerning what is acceptable and not acceptable as a person in social interactions. Pedro displays morals that are useful in his position as chapter master, but sometimes that comes between making tactically sound choices, but nevertheless, he gets the job done due to his morals. For example, when Pedro ordered Cortez, who is one of his company commanders, to only scout, but instead Cortez rescued Imperial citizens from a gang of orcs. This choice that Cortez made Cantor very angry because it was tactically wrong, but it was morally right. Cortez did suggest when the citizens fell behind that he would end their suffering, but Cantor said that this was wrong to do that, and said that they are under the protection of the chapter until they reach Rin City. But even after they arrived in Rin City, he still made sure that he would protect the people instead of abandoning them due to the morals that he has. Now, morals are important because they are rules for you, and it shows that you have lines that you do not cross, and people will respect you a bit more for having morals. The tip for this one is to look at yourself and observe what you see in society and to find out what you don't accept and things you do accept in society and social interactions. Now we have come to the end of the video on Pedro Cantor, Lord Hellblade and the 29th chapter master of the Crimson Fists. In the next video will be a surprise. If you liked the video, hit the like and share the video with someone who will like this content. To see more content, subscribe and hit the bell notification for when a new video comes out. Thank you for watching, and may Doran stand beside you. This is some Wisdom of Warhammer, signing off.